Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Something just happened. Something I didn't want to happen. Let's see from the beginning. Started. Why are we not starting? I don't know. Are you seeing?
It's not starting as a slideshow, you're right.
Yeah, it did for a second, but then it went back. I don't know why.
Be more patient. Just do it again, slideshow.
Slideshow. Okay, be patient.
From beginning and just wait.
Beginning. Resume slideshow. There we go. I did something.
There you go.
Yeah, you're right. My husband gets so irritated at me. I just like hitting all the buttons. Okay, so Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I hope everybody had a great holiday season, are ready for this new year. I know I am. And I actually love New Year's. And isn't it funny, every time that we have this phone ring, it never ends. I don't know why. But hopefully it's unavailable. They'll hang up in a minute. Okay, so I love New Year's. I love resolutions. I love all that stuff. So, but today we're going to talk about that a little, and we're going to talk about fat, because I know everybody's thinking, oh, we're supposed to be fat free, but really we're supposed to be choosing healthy fat. So for the Happy New Year, anybody have any resolutions? You can unmute and tell us if you have any, because I have quite a few. So I'm going to give you a minute to unmute. While you're unmuting, I'm going to tell you some of mine. One is I vowed to wear rubber gloves when I do the dishes because my hands are so dry. So just like with everything we do, you have to set up your world to support your new behavior. So I have my rubber gloves sitting right out on the stove, or on the sink, sorry. So that was one of mine, but my favorite one, and I was actually talking to Jill Burns about this, another dietitian who some of you may know, and I wanted to start cooking out of some of my cookbooks, because I tend to just go Google something, or it comes to me in my inbox and say, oh, that's fun, I want to try that. And so I know my cookbooks all have a lot of good stuff, so I was going to try to cook out of my cookbook. And Jill said she tries to just get one cookbook out a month, sets it out, leaves it by the stove or wherever you leave it, and cook out of that cookbook that month. So that's what I'm doing. I'm super excited about this one. So my cookbook I'm doing this time is I borrowed from my sister, How Not To Die Cookbook by Dr. Greger. I'll tell you about some of the recipes I've tried in it. So far, they've all been really pretty darn good. But I like it, so then I'm marking them and I'm saying little comments, because when I give it back to my sister, I want to tell her what I thought was good and what was bad. But that's my favorite resolution that I'm doing. So, okay, you've had time to unmute. Who has a resolution? Anybody? No?
My resolution is to cut down on salt.
Ooh, okay, excellent one. How do you plan to do that?
Well, number one is to use any product that has salt in it. If I can buy an alternative that has lower salt, I'll do that. And the other way is to just not use salt. There's no salt. Well, we still have salt, but it's put away.
See, that's a good idea. So it's not right in your vision.
It's not there anymore. And we use Mrs. Dash stuff.
Right.
And pepper. I use a lot of pepper, more than I have before.
Okay.
And maybe that's just me, but the big deal is to have it not right there.
Exactly. So true.
It's kind of like having an open box of See's candies sitting before you, you know?
Ugh, I know. Somebody gave us 2 pounds of See's. I just had to get it out of the house instantly. You're right.
Yeah.
Too hard.
Anyway, that's my thing.
I love that. That's a great one. Okay. Anybody else? No. You know, it's funny. So many people tell me, no, I don't do resolutions. And, you know, I think that's fine. But I love goals. I love being a goal setter. So to me, that's just another thing for resolution. So I like those, but maybe, hopefully by the time we're done today, you think of a goal or something that you might want to change. But along the idea of that no salt, I want to show you something. So in my How Not to Die cookbook, at the front of it, he's got different things that are used throughout the recipe. And then you would have them on hand, so you could just always use it. And one, he calls it a savory seasoning. And it just calls for different things that you have in your cupboard. I think the only thing I didn't have was celery seed, so that doesn't have that. But I just made some up, and a lot of his recipes call for it. So you could even make a lot of little seasoning mixes. I have a little taco seasoning that I always use. I have a barbecue seasoning. I have a jerk seasoning, and you can use those in place of salt too. But I like the savory seasoning, and he uses it in a lot of his recipes. Okay. So thank you. Any new holiday gifts anybody wants to share about? Nothing? Come on, you guys. You gotta have something.
Okay, I'll share.
Thank you.
This is Tony.
Yes,
I got one of these indoor LED hydroponic systems that can grow your herbs.
so awesome.
I hope I like it.
Oh, those are great. I had one of those years ago when they first came out, and I liked it. I can't remember why we quit using it, but
Well, I think
good.
I'd like to just do parsley and basil to
Yes.
start out with. I don't want to, I look at the picture and it's got tomatoes and all this, but I have a garden. I'd rather have the tomatoes out there.
Yes.
So it'll be just for, small herbs.
Uh-huh. Oh, I think that's excellent. You'll have to take little pictures and show us every time we're together.
Right. And then I got one of these big puzzle boards. I'm
Uh-huh.
going to start doing puzzles when I'm bored.
Oh, that is so good. I got 2 new puzzles for Christmas that I just started my first one yesterday. So
Yeah, I just had a birthday, so I got a puzzle for my birthday and the puzzle board for Christmas. And it's real cool because it doesn't have anything to do with food, but it has drawers on the side and you can put your pieces in there.
Oh my.
It's really nice.
Oh, well, that sounds fun. And happy
Yeah.
birthday to you.
Well, thank you.
But it might not have to do with food per se, but to me, it has to do with food, doing puzzles, because it keeps me from eating.
That's true, because my resolution is to cut down on carbs and to avoid sweets.
Uh-huh.
And I did cheat. I was in San Diego for 2 weeks and I cheated. It was hard because there's little kids and candy
Oh, yeah.
but I'm trying to get back on track.
Excellent. Good. So thank you for sharing. And
Okay.
that goes to our next new habits you'd like to do this year. Anything new you want to do? And so that kind of is a resolution too, I guess. I want to
Right.
cut back on my salt. I want to cut back on my sweet. So, and then you set up your world to support that. So I want to cut back on my sweet. So I'm going to do my puzzles when I get a hankering for something, So I think that's a great one. Okay. Anybody else have any habits, gifts, resolutions they want to share? Okay, we're going to move on. I guess I should have put this one at the top. What's your why? Because I think we all need to know why we're doing this, especially when other people say, you go and you're around family and friends, say, oh, come on, a little piece of candy is not going to kill you, or oh, have a bite of this. We need to know why. Do we do it because, are we trying to eat right and exercise because we want to feel better, because we want to look better, because we want to lower our medications, because we don't want to have a heart attack, because we don't want to have another heart attack, because we don't want to get diabetes? We got to know our why. Is our why because we want to be able to see our grandkids get married? Is it because we want to be able to see our grandkids? Is it because I want to be able to go on vacation and move around easily? You got to really know your why, because all of our decisions that we make in our new year should help us support that why. So I think that's a good thing to think about too, when you've got people going, oh, come on, let's not go for a walk, let's watch this movie. Well, my why is I want to be strong enough and healthy enough to go on a vacation this year and walk a lot. Hopefully we'll get to go on vacations this year. And so, that's not going to help me. So no, I'm going to go for my walk. So I really encourage you. And if that is the goal you set today, is got to figure out my why. And I bet a lot of you have an idea of what yours is. So, okay, so let's move on. So we're going to be talking about fat. So when you think about fat, or you hear dietary fat, what do we often think of? I kind of got the worst pictures I could find. I think that one breakfast is like what they serve in England, bangers and mash and all that stuff. I could not stand the breakfast when I was in England. And then we eat pizza and cheesy and fried foods. And I put the bread there because that does look like the worst case of bread you could ever see, because it looks like it has meat in it and cheese, and I think it's a croissant. But I put that because often when I'm in a class and I say, what do you think of when you think of fat? Somebody will always say bread. And bread generally is very low in fats. And if we do a whole grain, high fiber kind of bread, and we don't slather it in unhealthy things, bread's not really fattening, but fat is fattening. And then what we'll talk about mostly today is in that bottom right-hand corner, where there's good fats and there's bad fats. And so we want to avoid the bad fats and stick with the good, healthy, whole fats. I'm not going to be encouraging salmon, FYI, but it does have the good fat. Okay, so we got to have some fat. In fact, they've done millions of studies and shown that if people don't have fat, they have health problems. So we do need to have some. But in our foods, it gives our food texture. And if you've tried to modify recipes and lower the fat, you see it's different. It's not the same as your original product. It also adds flavor, and it has a great smell. So it's got a very important role in the foods that we eat. It also gives us calories. 9 calories in every gram of fat. A teaspoon of oil, as an example, has 5 grams of fat in it, so that's 45 calories. So it's really nutrient-dense calories. And that's important, especially let's say you are running a marathon. Well, you're not going to have fat during a marathon. That's not a good one. You are doing a long hike, and you need to have calories, but you don't want to be carrying lots of food. A little fat's going to help. Having a little peanut butter or a little, avocado or something like that along the route is going to help you to feel more satisfied and give you more energy. Now, as a reference, there's 9 calories, and you all probably know this, but carbohydrates and protein both have 4 calories in every gram. So when you say what's more fattening, carbs, protein, or fat, fat is the most fattening. And fat loves to be stored as fat, as opposed to carbs and protein that you actually have to burn some calories to get them stored as fat. And then fats have some good effects on health, because we do need to have some, like for our brain health, but others not so much. So we'll talk about the differences. So here's where we might get our fat. So animal sources would be meat, cheese, and dairy, and I'll show you in a minute that those are the artery clogging kind of fat for the most part. Then we've got plant sources. So yeah, the fat in plants is 9 calories for every gram also. They're just the healthier type of fat. So that's in our vegetable or olive oils, those kind of things. It's in our nuts, avocados, seeds. It would be in olives also. So those would be our plant sources. I'm going to throw in there too, I should have written in there coconut. I'll have a slide on coconut, because that's actually a plant source of fat too. And then there's somewhat hidden dietary fat, or fats that you don't really realize, especially if you don't cook much. You might not realize that when you order that eggplant parmesan, that you think this is pretty good because it's a vegetable thing, that it's one of the higher fat things on that Italian menu, because they bread that eggplant, they soak it in oil, they fry it, then they smother it with cheese. So, or you might think fettuccine Alfredo isn't so bad because it doesn't have meat in it, but it's loaded with the unhealthy kind of dairy products. French fries or anything that we fry, baked goods. A lot of times we think that those are pretty good, you know. Now bread, I know I mentioned, people always say bread's fattening. Well, bread itself isn't if you get a slice of whole wheat bread, but a croissant, on the other hand, half butter. So that's got a lot of the artery clogging fat. And then salad dressings, you know, we're trying to be so good and we have salads, but then if we smother it in ranch or Thousand Island or any of those kind of dressings, blue cheese, we add a bunch of calories. So those are our sources. So you can think about how you're making changes in your lifestyle, where you might want to be focusing on your fat. So here's just a little test of those hidden fats. Which food on this plate has the most fat? The bacon, the eggs, the hash browns, or the muffin? Okay, I'm going to give you a minute to unmute, shout it out. I should have done this as a poll.
The muffin.
The muffin?
I say the
Anybody else?
muffin.
Okay.
I agree. Muffin.
You guys are just too smart. Most people will go for the bacon or the eggs. But you're right, the bacon isn't a very big portion, really, 2 slices, so 7 grams. Those eggs, 14 grams. Those hash browns started out as potato with no fat in it at all, but then it makes it so porous it sucks up oil or butter like crazy, so 15 grams. And that's not even a huge portion. But that muffin, you're right, 32 grams of fat. And part of it is because of its size. So that size muffin is really the equivalent to 4 servings of carbohydrate or 4 pieces of bread in size. It's
Wow.
like a muffin. Isn't it crazy? It's the kind of muffin you would get if you are at Starbucks or Costco. Those, I think they're Otis Spunkmeyer or somebody makes those muffins. So yeah, it's huge. So we might think we're doing better by giving up the bacon and the eggs and the hash browns, which we are doing really good if we do that. And we're doing better by doing the muffin, but we're really not. Okay, so
I almost said the bacon, but then I changed my mind.
Well, it is kind of a trick question, you're right. Because you always think, well, bacon is the worst thing for it. It has no redeeming quality.
I know those muffins are humongous, and I know they have a lot of calories.
You're right. And, this is another reason why I think sometimes people might think that the muffin would be better, especially if they've never made a muffin. They don't know all the oil and butter and everything that goes into it. I think, it's funny, that just came to me. That is a good reason to make some of our own food, so you start to learn that. Because if you don't make your own food, we really don't know. But anyway, that's a little aside. Okay, so here's the fats. They break down into, and we're gonna go into a little chemistry, but the ones we don't want to have, and we want to limit as much as possible, are the saturated fat, the cholesterol, and the trans fatty acids. I've got little slides on those. The ones that we can have, but we want to do so in moderation, in just small amounts, because they can be healthy as part of a diet that is low in saturated fat, would be our monounsaturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, and our omega-3s. So I've got little slides, little chemistry pictures of all of these. So don't freak out by the picture. It's just to give you an example. So we've got most fats hook on to, this is actually a carb, is that glycerol, the blue backbone there. We call it a triglyceride because glycerol is the glyceride part, and the tri is we've got 3 kinds of fats. So we see that that first fat is a saturated fat. The next one is a monounsaturated fat. Oh, I think they both are mono. Let me see. I can't see because you guys are, go back. See, that's why it's always just so great to record us. So I'll show you individual pictures of the types of fat, but what they mean. But the point of this is to show you that fatty acids, are a long string of carbons. Those are all the little seeds that you see there. Now, carbons can hook up to things on all 4 sides. Like they can hold hands on 4 sides, however you like to think about that. So the first one is a saturated fat because the carbons are all hooked on. They've got hydrogens or a carbon on either side. So you couldn't get anything else to fit on there. So those would be our saturated fat. And I think my other slides are going to show your mono and poly. So I'll hold that thought. Oh, here we go. This is the next one. Okay. So the top one, saturated because all the carbons are hooked to something on all four sides. Now also, just as an aside, to go with it, the left end, the blue end, they call that the omega end. So you know we're going to talk about omega-3 fatty acids. So that means they're counting things from the omega end. And then the other side has an acid group on it. So you don't care about that. But this one's saturated because all those carbons are hooked up to something on all four sides. Now the next one, the second one, is a monounsaturated fat. So mono is for one. Unsaturated means it's not like the top one that's saturated. We can actually put something else on it. So when we have a monounsaturated fat, there's a little spot, and you can see where they've got the red circle that creates what we call a double bond. So there wasn't something on all four sides of those carbons, so they hook together. And that creates this double bond. So it's not saturated because we could actually pump another hydrogen onto that and get rid of that double bond. And because it's a monounsaturated, it's got 1 point of unsaturation. Unlike the one below it, it's got multiple points of unsaturation. You see all the little red circles. Now remember I said you'll hear omega-3 or even omega-6 fatty acids. That means where the double bond started at the third carbon from the end or the sixth carbon from the end. And interestingly, that seems like nothing, but that gives them very different qualities. So, and their omega-6s and omega-3s can both be very good, but in the wrong ratio, they can cause some problems. So that was your little science lesson for the day. So I think I might have one more too. So saturated fats, those are the, know where we can put a carbon on that. That actually gives it its shape and texture too. It makes it solid at room temperature. So if you think of lard, if you've ever seen lard, or you can think shortening too, or butter, those are solid. Now, what doesn't go with the solid is like whole milk or whole dairy products. Those also are very high in saturated fat, even though they're liquid. So they're mostly in our animal foods, our meat and our dairy. But there's also these things called tropical oils, coconut and palm kernel oil, that are from plants, but they are highly saturated. So they act kind of all the same. Take a look at my arteries on the left. This is what contributes to clogging our arteries, is our saturated fat, even more so than the cholesterol that we eat. So we start out, we're born with this nice clean garden hose of an artery, and then we go through years of more saturated fat and our arteries start to get clogged up until the bottom one when the blood can barely get through. So it's the longer chain when there's more carbons in that fatty acid of saturated fat that increase our LDL cholesterol, our bad cholesterol, and are associated with heart disease. The reason why I mention that is because coconut is a saturated fat, and it has just gotten so much press, and they have the best marketing people in the entire world because it's a medium chain saturated fat. And you know, it pains me to even say this, but it's true. From when I was in school 30 years ago, the saturated fat in coconut oil and coconut is not as bad as we thought. But it's still not a health food. And that's how it's being promoted so much. Is you got to have coconut, it's a health food, it does this for you and that for you. But really, it's not a health food. But it's true, and I will admit, it's not as bad as we thought. It's the shorter chain, so it's not a big long chain of carbon. It's digested easily, it gets absorbed into the bloodstream, and it tends to bypass some of the peripheral fatty tissue as the fat throughout our body. And so it doesn't get logged in there as much as other fats do. Like I told you before, fat loves to be stored as fat. So this one, not as much though. So that's why it's not as bad as we thought, but it's still not a health food. It's still highly saturated fat. So we still should limit it. And I don't know, I guess I have coconut oil in my house, and I use it as lotion. I put it on my legs, and it's really good, and the dog licks the legs, so the dogs really like it. So that is how I mostly would use my coconut. Okay, so common sources of saturated fat, like we said, it was mostly animals, dairy. So you got butter, you got all your meats, you've got all your dairy products. Now, it's true though, if you got non-fat dairy, like non-fat milk, non-fat yogurt, it wouldn't have the saturated fat. So that would be an option if we're still doing dairy. And it's the egg yolk that tends to have the saturated fat, not the egg whites. So if we're still eating eggs, we could be eating egg whites and enjoying those. Sour cream, really anything with cream in the title. But then they add some of these to our processed goods, like our chips or crackers, cereals. I mean, they added to the worst thing. Pizza. Pizza is loaded with cheese, and then it's loaded with those high-fat meats that are up there in line number 2. So that pizza's not so bad if we're just using it as a bread and we have a healthy sauce and we're putting veggies all over it. But it's what we do to it. And then ice cream, desserts, candy. You know what else I should throw in here, and I don't have it, would be salad dressings too. Salad dressings should be up there, especially like blue cheese or ranch, those kind of things.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'll wait till you're finished. I just had a question about pizza crust.
Okay.
Because I go to a place where it's kind of like a Subway where, you know, you tell them what toppings you want.
Uh-huh.
And I get nothing but veggies except for a little pinch of fake meat. But I was wondering I don't know what kind of crust. I get the thin crust, but then there's also gluten-free, but that's not the thin one. So
Yeah.
Can you address the crust kind of?
A
Or
crust,
does it matter?
You know, as long as they're not adding cheese to it, it's probably okay, but they probably do add a little oil. When I make my own crust, I have some that call for oil, some that don't. It's not very much oil, but I don't add anything else. And I got to assume at a pizza place, and I know those places you're talking about, I love those places, because you can pick what you want. I'm sure they use a little oil in their crust, but I think that's probably the worst of it.
So even the gluten-free ones still have some oil?
Yeah, I'm sure. They've got to do something to make it.
Okay.
Simple.
All right.
I don't think it's a lot, but I think they do.
Okay.
So I think the best way to know is to find the place that you go, and then we inquire. We go on their website and we look. So I'm happy to help you with that too. But I think because it's that thin crust, there's not a whole lot in it.
Okay. And thin is better?
Thin is better just because it's a little less bread. I personally love thick, but I get the thin at those places too because it's just less bready.
Okay.
But there's nothing wrong with thick if it's a good healthy crust. It just gives you more calories, more bread. I've been into this summer, well, even winter, grilling pizza crust. So I've used a few pizza crust recipes, and I will have to say the family likes it the best when you end up with a ball and then I divide it, say, into 4 pieces. So we have 4 little pizzas. When I only divide it into 3 and it's pretty thick, everybody really likes that. But it's still the same crust, so it's still fine. So it's whatever you like. But I love the places you're talking about. Thanks for asking that, Paul. Okay, if we wanted to reduce our saturated fat, the article stuff, well, we'd switch to plant-based milks when we do dairy. Or if we want to do non-fat dairy, we could do that. Limit your animal foods, and we talk about this every time, so I know you know what to do. You know, beans or lentils, we could do meat alternatives, we can do nuts, we can do soy. And those are all our protein foods. So a lot of our animal foods are our protein foods. So we can just use plant-based protein foods. We could not add fat to recipes. So most recipes say, you know, saute your onions in 2 tablespoons of oil. Well, just don't do that. Just don't add it. Some recipes are going to need a little bit because remember the fat adds to texture. So either you don't add it and the texture changes and you're happy with that, or you use less. We could also swap eggs in a recipe with plant foods. So like if you love eggs, you know, you could scramble tofu instead. or you can use a flax egg. I'll have that recipe on another slide. And if you are going to have fat, you want to choose the whole real food, just like we're doing with everything. Instead of having white bread, we're having whole grains. Instead of having white rice, we're having brown rice or barley. With our fat, instead of adding oil, which again is a processed fat, it would be okay, but you eat the nuts, eat the olives, eat the avocado. Just have a little bit, because it's still fat, still 9 calories in every gram. So here's the egg replacers. And I think we talked about that just egg before, so that's why I put the picture there. This is the one I always do, is 1 tablespoon of flax plus 3 tablespoons of water. You let it sit for 5 minutes and it forms kind of a gel. So in recipes that call for eggs, like your banana bread or something like that, that's what I use every time. It's my go-to. Also in baked goods, you could replace it with half a banana, some applesauce, a quarter cup of silken tofu. That's the soft one that comes in the little box. You can also buy an egg replacer. It's a plant-based egg replacer. I can't even think of what it's made of, but it's called Energy. And you know, I never get that. It's expensive, and then I don't use the whole darn box. So the flax is something I always have on hand. But some people, especially if you bake a lot, you might like that. And now they've got this new Just Egg. I know we talked about it in a previous discussion. It's made from the mung bean, and it comes in a little carton, just like that one. I saw it at Sprouts. It was $5.99 for that. And that is equivalent to 8 eggs. And I have not tried it personally. I think some people have, because the beauty of it compared to like your flax egg is you can scramble it, and it's going to be more like an egg. They also sell some that's already made into almost like a little omelet and folded in fours. So you can just pop it in your toaster. So they sell those too, although I did not see that at Sprouts. So, and I just pulled up, because we had talked about this before, I just pulled up their label. You know, and the thing with going with flax is you got flax. That's your only ingredient. When you go with something like this, they needed to do something to it to make it be egg-like. And I don't think there's anything bad here, although it does have a little salt, 170 milligrams of salt. I think the things are okay that are in it. It's just a lot of things. So depending on what your purpose is, for baking and substitutes, I definitely go with the flax egg or the banana or something like that. For scrambling, I personally am fine with scrambled tofu. Not everybody is, so you might like it for that. So just FYI. Also for omelets, you know, it would make a nice omelet also. But I like using the chickpea flour as an omelet. I think that John has even shown everybody how to do that before. It's use chickpea flour, and it comes out amazingly omelet-like. I think the secret, if you're doing your tofu or you're scrambling something that isn't egg-like, you add this black salt that's kind of sulfur tasting, and you just add a little smidge of it, but it gives it that egg flavor. I think that's the secret to it. And I got that black salt on Amazon, by the way. And it's not black, it's pink, which is odd. But okay, let's go back to another bad fat. Saturated fat bad, trans fatty acids. So these started out as even maybe a healthy fat, like a monounsaturated fat. But then what we wanted to do was we wanted to make it so that it would be spreadable, let's say. We want to spread it on our toast. Or we want to put it in something so that it will last till the next millennium. So they created this process called hydrogenation, where they pump that fat full of hydrogens. And remember, when it's saturated, you can't get any more hydrogens on it. So they start with the healthier ones, the unsaturated, but they turn it into a saturated fat, basically. But in that process, they flip the molecule. That's where the trans fatty acid name comes from. Cis is on the left, which means same. That means those hydrogens that you see around that double bond are on the same side. But trans, when they do that process, flips it somehow. And now the hydrogens are on the opposite sides, and that's what's trans. And you know, way back in the day, in the 90s, we thought, oh, you know, like margarine is so much better, it's cholesterol free. And, you know, we didn't know that in creating, say, our spreadable fat, like margarine, that it flipped the molecule. It doesn't have saturated fat, but it's got all these trans fats, and lo and behold, those act just like saturated fat. Who knew? And we didn't know. You couldn't even tell what was in things. It wasn't until I think 98 that they finally started putting it on the labels. And then everybody got wise to it. And so now they're taking the trans fats out of things. But you'll often find it in fry oil at a fast food place because it doesn't go bad as quickly. They don't have to change the oil as fast. It's also a cheap oil, so they will put it in our Twinkies and things that we shouldn't be eating anyway. But that's the whole trans deal. So it's often in baked products, it's in our margarines and shortenings, it's in our fried foods. You can always just look on the ingredients list, and if you see hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oil in your ingredients, that's not something we want to have. And now they'll list the trans fats on the label, which is nice. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to triglycerides with the healthier fats on them. So I guess triglycerides are a world unto themselves too. So let's look at the healthy fats. Monounsaturated, 1 point of unsaturation, so 1 double bond. These would be our healthier fats, the healthiest: avocado, olives, nuts, and the oils that they create. They've been shown to help lower our risk of heart disease, help lower our LDL, our bad cholesterol, especially if it's part of a diet that's low in saturated fat. If you are just stocking up on steak and butter and everything, and you just pour olive oil all over it, that's not going to help. It's got to be a low saturated fat diet. Now, polyunsaturated fats, they have more than 1 double bond. Poly is for many. And so these are mostly in our plant foods too, but also in our fatty fish, like salmon. I'll show you a slide on that. It's our vegetable oils. Sometimes the people call them the S oils. Soybeans, safflower, sunflower oils. It's also in soy, it's in nuts and seeds, and you're going to find monounsaturated in nuts and seeds too. And these have been shown to improve heart health. And so if we're going to choose fats, we want to choose these, but still 9 calories in every gram, and we don't want to have a whole lot of them. So here's our unsaturated fats. The polys are safflower, sunflower, corn, soybean, nuts and seeds. Our mono, same as I had on that other slide: olive oil, peanut oil, canola oil, nuts, seeds, avocados. So those are going to be our healthier ones. We want to choose from the bottom of that list, the whole real food whenever possible. Now, nuts and seeds, and I've really come about face since in the 90s when we told people don't have fats, fats are bad. Now we know that fats are good. We need to have some fats, but they should be healthy fats, and nuts and seeds are what are considered to be healthy fats. They recommend at least a serving a day. A serving is about 2 to 4 tablespoons, which is pretty big. They're a good source of these things called plant stanols or sterols, which is, I don't think they do it anymore, but like back in the 90s and early 2000s, they put these into some foods like margarine because they were a lot like, reacted a lot like our soluble fiber that help lower cholesterol. They act like that. And so nuts are a natural source of that, but they are really high in calories. So we do have to watch how much we have. But they have been shown in numerous studies that even if you're trying to lose weight or on a weight reduction diet, nuts and seeds are still going to help. They make you feel more full. They tend to bypass some of our digestion system so we don't get all the calories out of them. But we've got to be aware. You know, I know a lot of people, a lot of my patients, they get these big jars of nuts from Costco and they sit them by the chair, by the TV, and they're just sticking their hand in it while they're watching TV. So you've got to really be aware of how much you're having. Now, omega-3 fatty acids, and actually this was the main thing Linda wanted me to talk about today. These are associated with improved heart health. They're associated, these are one of those polyunsaturated fats, and it's omega-3 because the double bond started at the 3rd carbon from the omega end. So you guys can do great on Jeopardy if this is ever a topic. They help with brain health, and that's where they're really pushing the omega-3s, is that it really can help with brain health. You'll also see them associated with improving depression. We talked about that when we talked about food and mood. In fact, for people who are 100% plant-based, whole food plant-based diet, they do recommend a supplement. Not one that comes from fish, but one that comes from yeast or algae, about 250 milligrams a day. And that study was done mainly for brain health. as a heart health tip, what this does, it helps keep your blood from clotting. We have platelets in our blood and they get sticky and cause clots, which contribute to heart attacks. So this thins your blood a little bit and keeps you from having the sticky blood and clots. So in the fish sources, it's not every fish. Like if you love tilapia or you eat tilapia, that doesn't have a lot of omega-3. It's still not a bad fish source if you eat fish. But salmon, lake trout, mackerel, tuna, and sardines are the omega-3 rich fish. Plant sources, though, we can get it too. So walnuts, canola oil, flax, ground flax, and flax oil, chia, and hemp seed. So I'm going to talk about those a little because sometimes people don't know what to do with that. We know what to do with walnuts. We just pop them in and eat them. So the omega-3 seeds that I want to show you the benefits, the flax is probably the one that's had the most research. So that's probably why it's got the most up here. But it reduces inflammation, as actually the hemp does too. It helps with blood pressure, blood sugars. It helps with improved survival of breast and prostate cancer, and it may help prevent breast cancer. That hasn't been shown in the prostate cancer. The chia, I'll show you a picture of these two in a minute, is a good source of protein, fiber, magnesium, and it acts as an antioxidant. I know a couple weeks ago we talked about antioxidants. And hemp, some people think hemp, oh, isn't that like pot or weed or cannabis? And hemp doesn't have THC in it. It's just a seed from a plant, and it doesn't have the THC. So it's not like CBD or any of those things that we hear about all the time. It's a good source of protein, fiber. It's got lots of nutrients in it, like magnesium, like the chia, and it acts as an anti-inflammatory also. So those are our pictures. We've got our, I think we got the hemp at the top, the chia in the middle, and the flax seeds at the bottom. Now, to get the omega-3s out of those seeds, we want to grind them up. So, oh, and I meant to show you a picture. I'll do that when I unshare my slides. I'll show you a picture of them. But I always grind mine up, or I buy them ground. You know, some say if you buy the seeds and then you grind them, it's going to be fresher. And that's probably true. I have a dedicated little coffee grinder because we don't drink coffee here, but that's what I grind my flax seeds in. But what do you do with it? You can put it on oatmeal. You can shake it into salads. It adds all three of those add a little crunch. You can put it in your smoothies. You use it in a binder as recipes, in your recipes. So like when you, like the egg, the flax and the egg. You can make crackers. I think I told you last time I got this dehydrator and I made some pretty decent flax crackers using the flax. You can put it in the breakfast bites that I'm making today. You can sprinkle it on soups or grain dishes. You use it as a thickener. Gosh, I better keep talking. I'm going to run out of time. So that's what you can do with those things in case you're not sure. I buy mine almost exclusively in the bins at Winco, but you can buy them at Sprouts or Raley's, or they're very mainstream now. I just wanted to show you this because sometimes I think we feel like we only get one type of fat in the foods that we eat. And really, it's a combination of all of them. So canola's at the top, I think, because canola created this slide. But you can see the red is the saturated fat, what we don't want to have. The blue is the polyunsaturated, but it's the omega-6, comes from the other side. The kind of tan color are our omega-3s, alpha-linolenic acid. And then the yellow is the oleic or the monounsaturated fat. So you can kind of take a look and see. I think like soybean oil gets kind of a bad name, but it's not so horrible. But take a look at that flax oil, way loaded in the omega-3s. The canola has some. The olive oil is loaded in monounsaturated fat, but not very high in the omega-3. So they're all fine, but well, until we get to the bottom. So look at the bottom. Look at coconut oil, almost exclusively saturated fat. Butter, even, you know, coconut oil is even worse than butter. And then the palm oil, that's the one they add to our baked goods. And lard. You know, it's funny how lard doesn't look so bad compared to some of the other ones on here. So that's just FYI. So how are you going to reduce fat in your diet? Well, we could give up meat because meat is a big source of saturated fat. We could limit it or give it up. We could give up dairy or use non-fat dairy if we're there's other things associated with dairy. We don't need to go into that now, but you're going to make your decision how you want to go. You can limit your high fat condiments, like, secret sauce on things, mayonnaise, salad dressings. You can bake, broil, grill, and not fry. You can cut added fats in recipes. A lot of times you can just cut it. You don't have to eliminate it entirely, but some things you can eliminate entirely. You can swap high fat toppings for lower fat or plant sources. Now, truthfully, I've agonized over this one, but we could do non-fat sour cream. We could do a vegan sour cream or cream cheese, but they're still really high fat, so we still need to limit those. Even if it comes from a plant, it's still going to be pretty high fat. So there's lots of things we can do to cut back. I'll let you think about ideas. So here's our bottom line. Choose healthy fats in their most whole form. Nuts and seeds, avocado, olives, plant oils if we're going to use oil. But remember, when we use an oil, it is highly processed. You lose a lot of the benefits and the nutrients that we were saying that healthy fat did for us. And limit saturated and trans fats, animal foods, processed foods, fast foods. And Paul brought up a good point about going to that pizza place. He's not really sure what's in the crust. So we ask. So feel free to ask or go on their websites and they'll let us know. So what do you want to do? Are there fats that you eat right now that you could eat less of? Or could you substitute it with a healthier fat? I know peanut butter is one of my things. I could probably eat less peanut butter, even though that's a healthy fat. And in the world of peanut butter, it's best to go for the natural. How are you going to use the healthy fats? Are you going to sprinkle nuts or seeds on your cereal or salads or your Buddha bowl? I like to thicken my soups with a cashew cream, so it's just blended up cashews. Do you want to switch to plant-based milks or try some different plant-based milks? There's so many on the market right now. Do you want to use flax for an egg replacer? There's so many things we can do. So I really encourage you to make a goal today. But if you can think of one thing that you do right now, I should also have put maybe swap in that salad dressing or create a more vinegar-based salad dressing or citrus now, which is so good for salad dressing. So what are you going to do in I just heard this on a podcast today, 2021, but W-O-N. Do you have a behavior change you want to work on in the new year? Is there a physical activity, something you want to do? I know Linda's got some ideas for some challenges this year, so I can't wait to see how you do with all of those. So happy New Year. That's it on my fats. I'm sorry, I've just taken up so much time, but I'm going to I actually already made my recipes pretty much. I just want to talk to you about them. So I'm going to unshare. And I think now you see me, maybe. So my recipes, Linda sent them out. The breakfast bites were from this cookbook that I've been telling you about. And so I want to just describe it a little bit. Oh, I thought earlier, this might work better if I go lower. Okay, I thought maybe you could see a little bit better. So I use my food processor. And to me, this is a gadget I can't live without. But you soak your dates in hot water for about 20 minutes, drain them, and then you throw them in the food processor with some nuts. I today used a combination of walnuts and pecans because I just happen to have them. And then you blend that all up. And it wasn't as easy to blend as I thought because it got kind of dry and it was still pretty chunky in the date world. And so I added a little more water and kept blending till the dates were pretty much chopped. And then I added, this is where my omega-3s come from. I'm going to add my flax. Now I remember I buy mine in the bins. So then I put them into little jars. Here's my flax that is ground. And I actually, if you haven't bought flax before, I usually buy it ground. Or I buy it ground a lot. So for my flax crackers, I had to use whole flax. So I had to buy a little bag of whole flax. I think I got it at Sprouts or somewhere. But then you just put those in to grind them. Now whole flax are good too. You don't get to the omega-3s as much, But they do have these things called lignans. That's a phytochemical. In fact, last time I talked, we talked about antioxidants, and Linda challenged me and said, what phytochemicals aren't antioxidants? And really, the lignans in flax aren't. That they act as a kind of almost like a hormone. That's where we hear about the phytoestrogens. So it doesn't act as an antioxidant. So I finally found one thing. But so it calls for that, and then it called for some raisins or craisins, or it called for goji berries too, which I don't have. I actually went to the store. I considered getting the goji, but they were like $17 or something for hardly any. I just don't know that the goji is all that special.
What's in the middle jar, Debbie?
This is chia. Yeah, chia seeds. Sorry. This one?
Yes, you said flax, but chia.
Okay, flax, chia, nuts, raisins, and then a little cinnamon, and then I blended it up more. And then I use my tablespoon. This has been sitting out for a while. And you just roll it into a little ball. And it said if it's too dry, to add a little water. If it is too wet, add a little oatmeal. I thought that mine came out okay. And then you need to refrigerate it. One thing I'm terrible about is not reading a recipe all the way through. And then you get there and you think, oh, I'm going to serve this for the people coming over in 20 minutes, and you're supposed to let them sit for 4 hours. So remember that if you make these recipes. And then, so I just made a lovely, let's see, I'll make some room here. It says it makes 24. Oh, there we go. They're all going to roll in your way. So I don't know. I tasted them. I thought they were pretty good. I mean, there's nothing in there that's bad. So, you know, they're going to have to taste pretty good. So, and a serving is about 4 to 6 little bites. So I thought this was a nice little breakfast one. The other recipe I included, I'm not going to make that one, but it was the oatmeal, and it was an overnight oatmeal, but you do it in the crock pot. And I thought that was fun to have it in the crock pot. And it just added fruits and things. One thing, and I haven't made yet, but in this cookbook, now that I'm working through this month, it was a grain breakfast bowl using like leftover grain, like you cooked up some barley and had leftover. And what I loved about it was that it added some beans. It calls for cannellini beans. It's like 1 cup of your cooked grain to about 1/4 cup of a bean. Because I like that, because sometimes you think I'm not really getting quite as much protein as maybe I want to have at breakfast. So I like the idea of adding bean to it. I've not tried it, so I can't speak to it yet. But that's my next one to try, because I do love to try different things with oats. Okay, my other recipe is one that I'm not a recipe creator, but I'm trying to copy, because there's a restaurant I go to in Truckee called the Squeeze In, and I love this vegan bowl they have. And then my sister went somewhere and she had something that was similar. So over the holidays, and we've made it twice, we tried to recreate this dish. And basically it's layers with potato and tofu or a breakfast meat, you know, if you like the Beyond Meat sausage or something. And then it had some veggies in it. And then you cover it with a sauce, like a salsa. So I've made it numerous times, well, twice now, and I just did do it again. But you layer it all into your pan, your glass pan, or whatever pan you have, and then you pour your salsa or whatever. It calls for a green salsa, which so far twice I've made it with that, but I didn't have any today, so I'm putting a red salsa on it. But you could also make up your own little salsa. It's just to make it kind of wet. And then you cook it for about, I don't know, 15 minutes just to heat it through, because everything's cooked. But I have to show you one of my favorite new things. I read about this on a blog before Christmas, and it was called the Copper Crisper. And they said it would be like an air fryer. I don't have an air fryer. Those of you who've heard me talk know that I really covet the air fryer. But it's big and huge, and I didn't want it. So this was supposed to be like, treat your food like an air fryer. It was about 20 bucks. I saw it, I clicked, I put it on my Amazon wish list, and Santa brought it to me. And I've used it 3 or 4 times now, and it's growing on me. but I did it with my tofu today. I basically chopped up my tofu and put it on this little basket. The basket's on a copper tray, and then you stick it in the oven at 425. I did it for about 25 minutes. And it's supposed to make things crispy because the air can circulate. So this is actually like a basket. And this was my first time I did the tofu without putting anything on it but some Mexican seasoning. And it did a good job, I gotta say. It makes it kind of crispy. Probably I did some potatoes the other day to make them like French fries, and it did pretty good. I don't know, I kind of like it. But so my recipe called for tofu. Sorry, I got way late. Potatoes. I basically, I'm gonna turn this down so you can see. I did a couple brown, a couple red, a couple sweet potatoes, and they're actually sweet potatoes, not yams, so you're not seeing any orange. I put them on my cookie sheet, 425 for about half an hour, and they got done. And then I'm gonna add my tofu on top of that from my fancy basket. Now, when we made this over the holidays, we used that Beyond Meat sausage too. I'd never had that before. It's pretty tasty, but it's high in fat and salt and everything else. So this is, so far, no salt. And then you take a bean. I'm just using a low sodium canned bean that I drained. Sprinkle that on it. Spread it around. And then I cook up some veggies. Sorry, I just used red pepper, green pepper, some onions, and for a little heat, I also added a jalapeno that I happen to have. So, and I use my handy dandy cast iron skillet for that. Now you could also sprinkle some seasonings on here, but this is where you start to pour on the green salsa. And the green salsa is really good, so I'm going to be really curious how it is with the red. But I just sprinkle it on there, and you kind of do need to do this. You need to add that because otherwise it's kind of dry, especially since I didn't use any oil or anything. But when I heat it up, now it's going to, the wet part's going to drip down to my drier potatoes and tofu. And it is going to be just the yummiest thing you've ever had in your whole life. And then, so sorry, come back up to me. So you cook it, just let it heat through. You top it with tomatoes or avocado, whatever you like. You could also make like a little Mexican crema. Sometimes I've done that with cashew cream and sriracha or something. And it's really great. And it's good for every meal, not just breakfast. I put it into tortillas. In fact, so that's what I put in the recipe is I toast up the tortillas in my cast iron usually just so they get kind of crispy. And then I lay that on my plate and put that on top of it. So you could make little tacos if you want to, but I don't know. This is definitely a keeper. And it's, I got to say, my first recipe I actually created, but I stole most of my ideas. But I think that's a real keeper. And I think that's all I've got. I don't know. Questions? You have to be awfully quiet.
Awesome job.
Oh, so anybody have any ideas for this dish? I loved how last time you helped me with my sheet pan ideas.
Oh, I have something to say. We tried that sheet pan recipe,
Yeah.
and my son-in-law in San Diego just loved it.
Oh,
They all
really?
loved it, and it's so simple.
It is. I'm so glad
Yeah,
you
it was
did it.
really good. Thank you.
I ate that for days. I've got to say I was sick of it by the end.
Yeah, we did also.
It made so much.
I wonder with the vegetables there, if you're locked into that sort of Mexican style spices, or if you could if they're bland enough or flexible enough to throw in curry spices.
Oh, see, that is so great. You could totally do that. Definitely. And if you did curry spices, you could also use garbanzo beans instead of black beans. And you could throw cauliflower in there. I mean, you're right. There's a world of possibilities. And I think that's what we've got to think about. Thanks for that idea, John. When you're looking at recipes, just think of it as a little template. And you could swap out things. You can swap out the protein. You can swap out the starch. You can swap out the bean. You can swap out the sauce. Absolutely. And I think if I did the curry, I'd go all sweet potato.
Sounds dangerous.
That sounds fun. Yes.
And use lentils instead of black beans or something.
Totally, yes. That would be great. Mm-hmm.
Then you'd have to take credit for it as an original recipe.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, feel free to steal any of my stuff. I steal everybody else's. Okay, well, I'm sorry I kept you a little long today. Had more to talk about. Anything else we should do?
No, thank you, Debbie. That was great.
Thank you. That was fun.